Adana Okeke had learned to disappear. In the chaos of Lagos, where the rich sped past in sleek cars and the poor hawked goods under the blazing sun, she was just another shadow. At 22, she had no home, no family, and no real plan beyond surviving the day. She spent her nights under the bridge near Oberland, a place where the city's noise faded into the hum of crickets and the occasional rumble of trucks. Her days were spent selling small trinkets, cheap bracelets, handkerchiefs, anything she could find, to passers-by who barely noticed her. But Adana was sharp. She had to be. Life on the streets didn't forgive mistakes. One evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and the air grew heavy with the promise of rain, Adana noticed a sleek black car pulled over on the side of the road. The engine was off, and a man in an expensive suit stood beside it, looking frustrated. She recognized him immediately. Emeka Ease. The billionaire tech mogul whose face was plastered on billboards and magazine covers. He was younger in person, but his sharp features and confident stance matched the photos. Adana hesitated. She didn't like dealing with rich people. They either ignored her or treated her like she was invisible. But something about the way he was pacing, muttering under his breath, made her curious. She approached cautiously, her bare feet silent on the pavement. "You need help?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Emeka looked up, startled. His eyes swept over her, her worn clothes, her dusty feet, the small bag of trinkets slung over her shoulder. For a moment, she thought he'd dismiss her like everyone else. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Flat tire," he said, gesturing to the car. "And I don't have a clue how to fix it." Adana raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a driver?" "I sent him home," Emeka replied, his tone clipped. "I wanted to drive myself for once." Big mistake, apparently. She almost smiled. "Let me see." She crouched by the tire, examining it with practiced ease. "You have a spare." "In the trunk," he said, watching her closely. "But I can call someone." "No need," she interrupted, standing up. "I can do it. Just pop the trunk." Emeka hesitated but did as she asked. As she worked, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. Emeka stood under the bridge, his suit jacket pulled tight around him, while Adana worked quickly, her hands moving with confidence. When she was done, she wiped her hands on her skirt and stepped back. "There. You're good to go." Emeka stared at her, rainwater dripping from his hair. "You're incredible," he said, his voice softer now. "What's your name?" "Adana," she said, shrugging. "It's nothing. Just a tire." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not just a tire. You saved me from a very long night." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash, handing it to her. "Here. For your trouble." Adana looked at the money, then back at him. She wanted to refuse it, to prove she wasn't just another beggar. But the truth was, she needed it. "Thank you," she said quietly, tucking it into her bag. Emeka watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he got into his car and drove off, leaving Adana standing in the rain. She didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. For both of them. A week later, Adana was back under the bridge, her trinkets spread out on a small mat. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp, and the streets were quieter than usual. She was counting the money Emeka had given her, wondering how long it would last, when a familiar black car pulled up. Her heart skipped a beat. Emeka stepped out, his suit perfectly pressed, his shoes shining under the streetlights. He looked out of place in the gritty surroundings, but he didn't seem to care. He walked straight toward her. "Adana," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've been looking for you." She stood up, brushing dirt off her hands. "Why? Did your tire go flat again?" He almost smiled. "No. I need your help." She frowned. "My help? With what?" "I need someone like you," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Someone who knows how to survive. Someone who doesn't take no for an answer. I want you to come work for me." Adana laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Work for you? Doing what? Cleaning your office?" "No," he said, his tone serious. "As my personal assistant. You're smart. You're resourceful. I need that." She crossed her arms, her guard up. Why me? You have people falling over themselves to work for you. Rich people. Educated people. Exactly, he said, stepping closer. They're all the same. They tell me what I want to hear. You're different. You're real. Adana looked away, her chest tight. She didn't trust him. Rich people always wanted something. But the thought of leaving the streets, of having a real job, was tempting. I don't know, she said slowly. I'm not sure I'd fit in. You don't have to fit in, he said. Just be yourself. That's what I need. She hesitated, her mind racing. What's the catch? No catch, he said. Just a job. A chance to start over. Adana stared at him, trying to read his face. He seemed sincere, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. Still, what did she have to lose? Okay, she said finally. I'll try it. But if it doesn't work out, I'm gone. Emeka nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Fair enough. Be at my office tomorrow morning. 8 sharp. As he drove away, Adana sat back down, her mind spinning. She didn't know what she was getting into, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her chance. Maybe she could finally leave the streets behind. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that Emeka Ease wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a new life, one that came with its own set of risks. And she wasn't sure she was ready for that. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Adana showed up at Emeka's office in Ikoyi, a towering glass building that made her feel small. She was given a desk outside his office, a laptop, and a stack of tasks she barely understood. But she learned fast. Emeka was demanding, but he was also patient with her. He'd explain things once, and she'd remember. She organized his schedule, handled his emails, and even started suggesting ideas for his projects. He listened to her, which surprised her. Most rich people didn't listen to anyone. One evening, after a long day, Emeka leaned against her desk, his tie loosened. You're good at this, he said, his voice tired but warm. Better than the last 3 assistants I had. Adana looked up from her computer. Maybe because I actually care. He raised an eyebrow. You care about my business? No, she said, meeting his gaze. I care about doing a good job. There's a difference. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made her smile. Fair point. As the weeks turned into months, they grew closer. Emeka started sharing things with her. Stories about his childhood, his struggles building his company, even his regrets. One night, after a late meeting, they sat in his office, the city lights glowing outside the window. He told her about his father, a strict man who'd pushed him to succeed but never showed him love. I spent so much time trying to prove myself, he said, his voice quiet. But now, I don't even know who I'm proving it to. Adana listened, her heart aching for him. She told him about her own past, about losing her family and ending up on the streets. I used to think I was alone, she said. But now, I don't know. Maybe we're all just trying to find our way. He looked at her, his eyes soft. You're not alone anymore, Adana. Not if I can help it. Their connection deepened, and so did their feelings. One rainy afternoon, as they worked late, Emeka reached for her hand. Adana, he said, his voice hesitant. I don't know how to say this, but I care about you. More than I should. She froze, her heart pounding. Emeka, this isn't a good idea. I work for you. People will talk. Let them talk, he said, his grip tightening. I don't care about what people think. I care about you. She pulled her hand away, her emotions a tangled mess. You don't know what you're saying. I'm not like the people in your world. I don't belong there. You belong where you want to belong, he said, his voice firm. And if you want to be here, with me, then that's where you belong. Adana looked at him, tears in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of losing everything held her back. I need time, she whispered. This is a lot. He nodded, his expression understanding. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. That night, as she lay in her small apartment, a gift from Emeka, Adana couldn't sleep. She thought about his words, his touch, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. She wanted to trust him, to let herself love him. But the scars of her past ran deep, and she wasn't sure she was ready to take that leap. Not yet. Just when Adana thought she was starting to figure things out, everything fell apart. It started with a man showing up at the office, a tall, wiry figure with sharp eyes and a familiar smile. He introduced himself as Chaik, Adana's long-lost brother. She hadn't seen him in years, not since their family fell apart. At first, she was overjoyed. But the joy didn't last. Chaik pulled her aside one evening, his voice low and urgent. "Adana, you need to be careful with Emeka. He's not who you think he is." She frowned, her stomach twisting. "What are you talking about?" "Our family," he said, his voice bitter. "Do you remember how we lost everything? The business deals that went bad. The debts. It was him, Adana. Emeka Ease. His company ruined us." Adana felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "It's true," Chaik said, his eyes hard. "I've been digging into his past. He doesn't even know who we are, but he's the reason we ended up on the streets. The reason our parents died broken. She shook her head, tears welling up. "You're lying. Emeka wouldn't do that. Wouldn't he?" Chaik snapped. "You think a man becomes a billionaire by being nice? Open your eyes, Adana. He's using you, just like he used everyone else." That night, Adana confronted Emeka. She stormed into his office, her hands shaking. "Did you know?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Did you know what your company did to my family?" Emeka looked up, confused. "Adana, what are you talking about?" "My family," she said, her voice rising. "We lost everything because of you. My parents. They died because of you." Emeka stood up, his face pale. "Adana, I swear, I didn't know. If I had." "If you had, what?" she interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "Would it have made a difference? Or would you have just swept it under the rug like everything else?" He reached for her, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "I trusted you. I thought you were different. But you're just like the rest of them." Emeka's eyes filled with pain. "Adana, please. Let me fix this. Let me make it right." "You can't," she said, her voice hollow. "Some things can't be fixed." She turned and walked out, leaving him standing there, stunned and heartbroken. 4 days, she avoided him, ignoring his calls and messages. She didn't know what to do, who to believe. Part of her wanted to forgive him, to believe he hadn't known. But the other part, the part that had been hurt too many times, told her to run. One night, as she sat alone in her apartment, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Emeka standing there, his face drawn and tired. "Adana," he said, his voice soft. "I need you to know something. I didn't know about your family. But that doesn't change what happened. And I'm sorry. More sorry than I can say." She looked at him, her heart aching. "Sorry isn't enough, Emeka." "I know," he said, his eyes pleading. "But let me try. Please. Let me make it right." Adana stood there, torn between the past and the future, between anger and love. She didn't know what to say. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. Adana didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, staring at the city lights, her mind racing. Emeka's words echoed in her head. Let me make it right. She wanted to believe him, but the pain of her past was a heavy weight. By morning, she had made a decision. She would hear him out, not because she owed him anything, but because she owed it to herself to know the truth. She went to his office, her heart pounding. Emeka was waiting, his face tense but hopeful. "Adana," he said, standing up as she walked in. "Thank you for coming." She crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "Talk." He took a deep breath. "I looked into what happened to your family. It's true. My company was involved in the deals that ruined them. But I didn't know, Adana. I was young, reckless, focused on building my empire. I didn't see the damage I was causing." She shook her head, tears welling up. "That doesn't change what happened. My parents, they died because of you." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And I can't undo that." But I can try to make things right. I've started a foundation to help families like yours, people who've been hurt by my business. I want to give back, to fix what I can. Adana stared at him, her emotions a tangled mess. Why now? Because of me. Yes, he said without hesitation. Because of you. You showed me what really matters. It's not money or power. It's people. It's love. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. She looked away, her chest tight. I don't know if I can forgive you, Emeka. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said softly. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to be better. To do better. With you. Adana wiped her tears, her heart aching. She thought about her parents, about the life she'd lost. But she also thought about the man standing in front of her, the man who had changed her life, who had shown her kindness and love. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she knew she wanted to try. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll take it one day at a time. But no more secrets. No more lies. Emeka nodded, his eyes filled with relief. No more secrets. I promise. Over the next few months, they worked together to build the foundation. Adana threw herself into the project, using her own experiences to help others. Emeka supported her every step of the way, proving through his actions that he was serious about change. Slowly, trust began to grow between them again. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of doubt and pain. But they faced them together. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, watching the sunset over Lagos, Emeka took her hand. Thank you, he said, his voice soft. For giving me a second chance. Adana smiled, leaning into him. Thank you for showing me that people can change. They stood there, hand in hand, as the city lights began to twinkle below. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Adana felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be.